Hello and welcome. We're back to studying through our Bible series in this video format. Last week we looked at evidences from within the Bible. Today we're going to be looking at evidences for the truth of the Bible from outside of the Bible. Now the Bible is not a history book, but it works in the realm of history. And there are things that are recorded in there and prophecies that are made that have to do with the history of the world. We're going to be looking today in the book of Daniel. And in Daniel chapter 2, we read of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He had this dream and he told all his wise men, his seers, his conjurers, that they had to tell him not only the interpretation of the dream, but also the dream itself. They came back to him and they said, "No man can do this." And it was left to Daniel, through the power of the one true God, to reveal both the dream and the interpretation. So we pick up the story in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 31. "You, O king, were looking, and behold, there was a single great statue. That statue, which was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome. The head of that statue was made of fine gold, its breasts and arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron, partly of clay. You continued looking until a stone was cut without hands, and it struck the statue on the feet of iron and clay and crushed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed, all at the same time, and became like chaff from the summer threshing floor, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became the great mountain that filled the whole earth." This was the statue, the dream, rather, that King Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonians was given. This was revealed to Daniel by God, and now he gives the interpretation. Notice in verse 36 of Daniel 2. "This was the dream. Now we will tell its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power and the strength and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand, and has caused you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold. After you there will arise another kingdom inferior to you, then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. Then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So, like iron that breaks into pieces, it will break all these into pieces. In that you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, it will be a divided kingdom. But it will have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. As to the toes of the feet were partly of iron, partly of pottery. Some of the kingdom will be strong, and part of it will be brittle. And in that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another and in the seed of man, but they will not adhere to one another, even as the iron does not combine with pottery." So here we have the start of the explanation. The statue, Daniel says, these are the great kingdoms of the world. First of all, we have Babylon, the head of gold. After that, we see the kingdoms that follow it. Now, even in the book of Daniel, we see the kingdom of Babylon being destroyed by the Medo-Persian Empire. That is the second one, the one of silver. After the the Medo-Persian Empire came the Greek Empire, headed by Alexander the Great. And then following that was the great Iron Kingdom, the kingdom of the Romans. And then we see at the end of the Roman Empire this weakness that came in. And we can see that was at the time when Christ came. So this is the statue. But then we see something else. Verse 44. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. And that kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crash and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it itself will endure forever. Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that crushed the iron and the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God has made known to you what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation trustworthy. Well, Nebuchadnezzar could see that only a man from God could reveal this dream and the interpretation to him. And he raised up Daniel to rule over all the wise men of the land. And in doing that, he saved all their lives. So we can see here, long before it happened, we can see the kingdoms of the world. The Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, the Greek, and the Roman Empire. But that's not just where Daniel and his visions leave off. Let's go over to Daniel chapter 8, and we will see very clearly in another vision how God revealed to him the kingdoms that were to come. Now in Daniel 8, the Babylonian Empire had already fallen, and Daniel is serving now in the Medo-Persian Empire. And so he has this dream, this vision, and we'll start reading in Daniel 8 and verse 3 and go to verse 8. Then I lifted my eyes and looked, behold, a ram which had 2 horns and was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power. But he did as he pleased, and magnified himself. While I was observing, behold, a male goat was coming out of the west over the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. And he came up to the ram that had the 2 horns, which had been standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. And I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged with him. And he struck the ram and shattered his 2 horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly. But as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place come up 4 conspicuous horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. Now this seems very confusing, what this could mean. In fact, it reminds us of some of the passages in the book of Revelation that are very hard to interpret. But here in Daniel chapter 8, we have an interpretation of this vision. Notice Daniel 8, starting in verse 18. Now, while he was talking with me, this is the angel, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand upright. He said, Behold, I'm going to let you know what will occur in the final period of indignation, for it pertains to the anointed time at the end. Verse 20. The ram which you saw with the 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. The broken horn and the 4 horns that arose to replace it represent the 4 kingdoms which will arise from his nation, although not with his power. So there we have it. What this is another vision similar to the statue. But what we see first is the ram, which he says is Medo-Persia, represented by the 2 horns. Then the shaggy goat with 1 horn came. Well, the Medo-Persian Empire, which was in the future in Daniel's time, was destroyed by the Grecian Empire led by a strong emperor, Alexander the Great. And he swept through the world and made a kingdom larger than any before it. But he died prematurely. And in his place rose 4 generals that divided the kingdom and weakened the kingdom, just as we see here in this prophecy. Now, while the Bible isn't a book of history, we can see that history shows us that the Bible and its prophecies are indeed true. Rightly does the Bible tell us in Romans 10:17, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. Can you trust the Bible? Most certainly, because the Bible can be proven to be correct time and time again. Well, if you enjoyed this video, come back and join us next week. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much, and goodbye for now.